You are listening to River West Radio on WXRWLP 104.1 FM, Milwaukee. Support for this program comes from Collectivo Coffee, dedicated to keeping Milwaukee's bike riding community rolling with bike pumps available for use in all Collectivo cafes. More info is available in cafes and at collectivocoffee.com. Welcome to Cinema Fireside. We're glad that you're here. And we hope that you're certainly well. That's big stuff to be around, and life is good as long as you know how to live it. And it's a Cinema Fireside. Hopefully Gabe will check in. He told me he had caught up on some recent films, and so did I. Actually, welcome to the first, or the beginning of the era of autumn in 2017. It's beautiful out. If you're listening live in Milwaukee, it's been very hot. I think it may have even hit 90 a day or two ago. It was in the 80s today. So it's just like summer out there. And that's good, in a sense, because, why not? Winter's great, too. Autumn is, of course, the best. There's no doubt about that, with the fury of the amber foliage, blinding us in its aesthetic impact. Just great stuff. It is the horror season, and I know that on another entity they will be turning to horror radio dramas in October and in November. And I realized, I think it was around September 20th, that the need to get on the horror film was pressing. So I kicked it off with two early 80s films. One is Prom Night from 1980, and one is Sleepaway Camp from 1983. Gabe rocks. He has called in both those films, or at least in the mixing them up. They're socially and morally disturbing. These films are bad news. There's some films that are so good, or so bad that they're good. And there's a number of them, and they're very much worth revisiting, including 1976's The Incredible Torture Show. Great film, and it was renamed by Troma as Blood Freaks, something along those lines. And actually, I'm making a list of bad horror films, or it should just say don't ever watch again, which Prom Night and Sleepaway Camp will undoubtedly fall into, and things like The Incredible Torture Show, which stays with you for life. And then you have ones that are down the middle, like such as the new It, where there's no reason ever to see it again, but it's not bad, but it doesn't. It's a very well made film, but there's no reason for a return visit. It's not like a Dracula or a vampire or a Frankenstein or many of those weird ones from the early 60s in black and white, or those cool color ones, especially those vampire and Satan ones from the early 70s, which have an aesthetic that's worth revisiting just for the composition, the sheer absurdity of the mise-en-scène. That's everything that's going on within the frame. Those are definitely worth revisiting, so I got to make that list, and believe you me, I'm going to check it more than twice. So, yeah. Never watch again, of interest, and, for life. So those three categories, essentially, I'll be putting those films in. So, yeah, when I put on Prom Night, I was like, oh, man, okay, this is about 90 minutes of your life that's about to go down the drain. And luckily, though, that there's a subtextual narrative or a parallel narrative that goes along with watching films, and you have the ability to drift off into other worlds, strategize for the rest of the week, think about your own work. So it's not like a normal who just sits there and is like held hostage by this horror, but rather those in the know, roll on with their thinking and get a good 90 minutes out of it. And then another 90 minutes of my life went down the drain when I put on Sleepaway Camp, and I was like, oh, man. But I said, if this is going to be like this slow psychological torture. Again, you can just go through your life, go through your plans, your strategies, your work. So this is kind of like cool because you're like in this holding pattern where you get to revel in all of that. So make use of it. So that was cool. Then context over content. It's like none of these films, it's like going into and saying, wow, I'm going to really take a ride. It's just kind of like you're aware that you're watching them and you really don't care about the content because it's all going to be a memory anyway. So with it, I thought, well, this will be a memory. It's in that autumnal season, and people will say 20 years from now, oh, did you see it? And yeah, I saw it, and you can just lock that down. So, and then we move on. Oh, it was on a Friday, and I'm not sure exactly, every day is a busy day, an occupied day, and toward the end, I was on the east side and said, man, it's the Halloween season. I got to get horror films. And actually, the East Side Library has a special section of horror films. And I think they close at 6 on Friday. So I booked down there. And let's see, I got Phantasm Ravager, the final Phantasm in the series. The point of all of that stuff is the film that comes out, Phantasm in 1979, one of the great horror films of all time, just dreamlike. And did you see this, the sequel, this to that? All of that stuff is immaterial. It's the only thing that counts is the film that came out. So everything else is completely immaterial. Now, academically, the other ones were watched, and now this final one will be watched, thanks to the East Side Library. And another thing, which I was very happy to come across, was Eli Roth, The Green Inferno. Professionally written script. To write scripts like that takes time, takes thinking, takes intelligence, because you are weaving a very complex tapestry of characterization and circumstance, and all of these traits that are embellished in a character are there for a reason, because these are Hollywood films, whether they're made in Hollywood or not. It's a particular budget with a particular sensibility. And good Hollywood films are very professionally tight. And anything a character says or does contributes to the narrative tract in a whole. Everything it aggregate. Everything has a purpose. Every little piece, every word spoken, every gesture made in those kind of films have meaning. Now, there's another thing, and just to digress, in John Frankenheimer's very, very excellent 7 Days in May, and we are now looking at Frankenheimer's Holy Triptych, which is The Manchurian Candidate, 7 Days in May, and Seconds. Those are some of those great 60s, early to mid-60s films before you kind of have this new American cinema come in. And these are black and white. The Manchurian Candidate, 7 Days in May, and Seconds. That Holy Triptych from Frankenheimer. Just great stuff. But the reason why I brought up 7 Days in May, because at the beginning of the film, I think it's either the president or one of his aides or colleagues or something gets up from his chair and slightly trips. This has nothing to do with any sort of narrative fulfillment whatsoever. It's a mistake the actor makes, but it's kept in there because it adds to the realism of the film that this is trying to portray. So that's a circumstance that would never be allowed to occur in a film because there is no reason for it to occur, but it's left in because it creates a particular tone of like, wow, okay, that was unexpected. That was realistic. So that's why that survives in that film, I suggest. I don't know. I wasn't the editor. I wasn't even born I don't think, because seconds is 66. 7 days in May, I believe, is before then. I believe so, yes. Maybe 64 or something. So I certainly wasn't in the editing room at that point. So anyway, we move back to the Green Inferno. And Gabe, thanks for holding on. We appreciate your patience, your wherewithal, your smarts, everything you got. And it's so tightly woven. I mean, you can talk about it for quite some time. Some of it, I don't want to say flaws, because that word makes me cringe, because it's film terminology that has no meaning. Usually when they say it's flawed, that they don't bring up any proof. It's the word, like, it's almost a perfect film. I mean, I'm ensconced in all of these film journals and the New York Times and all that. Some for decades have been exposed to this kind of language. So, but there are actually a couple flaws, like when they're in the cage and their hair is also immaculately washed and so forth. That's actually a technical flaw. Then when the natives get completely stoned off this little bag of weed, and I'm talking about all these natives in a wide area, that's technically impossible. That's a flaw. When cynics or when critics use the word flaw, they don't mean it like that, because they pretend those things actually don't exist. They're not into the technical realm of film. They're just more into its moral structure and so forth. So when they use the word flaw, that you're like, what are you talking about? It's esoteric. You can't pin it down to what they're talking about. It's an abstract when it's used predominantly. It's predominantly an abstract. There's no proof at all what they're talking about. And just real quick, I just thought I'd throw it out there. I mean, the epitome of American cinema, ends with Apocalypse Now in '79. Its penultimate version is Taxi Driver. That is the end of the new American cinema in one of the two greatest films ever made, Taxi Driver and Apocalypse Now. No other films really come close to those in minimalist and maximalist bombacity. So that is good stuff. And also, I realized I hadn't read my summer noir novel, so I got on that, hit up the library system, and they provided me well with, I believe her name is Dorothy Hughes, and In a Lonely Place. What a great novel. It actually takes place in September. It is September. So just great to check out, undoubtedly. And Gabe, my man, we're gonna bring you into the realm of the real. Welcome to your life, my man, or your radio
Mark,
life, that is.
Mark, very good to be here. Excellent opening this week. Excellent stuff, Mark, as always. But man, just exquisite this week. Man, good stuff. You got me seeing these movies in my head. You got me thinking about them, and just really bombastic, all over the top, dead on take about this the absurdity of certain film terms, especially some of these terms I use myself, and I cringe catching myself using them. Sometimes there is they just come out just because of the you mean one thing and you say another, and sometimes you just come up short. Like laying in bed thinking, but those final minutes before you fall asleep, if just, oh man, I came up short. Oh, that's not what I meant. And the word flawed, the word perfect, they're thrown around really lazily and really without any discretion or discern. So thank you for pointing that out, Mark, that certain film critic, especially amateur film critic terminology, is just really reckless at times. And so always be careful. Always be careful of that. Anyone listening, recklessness with your film terms is a really easy way to really not be discerning and to not really enjoy your films to the max. There will be stretches where I won't enjoy 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 films that I watch, sometimes within a very short period of time. I'll knock out a bunch of films that come out within a very short period of time that all of which I'm anticipating or I really want to see or have really been looking forward to. Have done read countless reviews, countless film festival write-ups, and you see it, and it's just everything that you've read about is there, the content-wise, and all of the reasons that you've been anticipating this film are there. The director, yes, directed this film. The actors are there. The plot of the film is there. The elements that you were looking forward to are there. The setup is there. It's all there, except for my own personal enjoyment.
Wow.
And you can even say like, oh man, this was, Baby Driver definitely falls into this category of this film, by all reasoning, mathematical, subjective reasoning, should have been one of my favorite films of the year. And it just absolutely fails on all levels of a film needing to be made. It is absolutely such a pointless addition to the film canon, even though it is insanely well done. The filmmaking, the choice of music, the camera work, the sense of humor, the acting, the action sequences, especially the action sequences, are exquisite, among the best I've seen in years. But as a whole, the film has no point, no purpose, no logic, and it has no reason for existing, and it has nothing to offer the human race. It absolutely generates no positive relevance. It gives nothing to the humanities, but it's exquisitely well made. So when you and I were on the show, when I was in the studio in person the other week, and I was
so good to see you, Gabe, too. And I want to point out, when you were here, obviously that was a very good thing, and we ate well, and I reflect fondly upon that. And then you were obviously up on stage, and you gave it all you had, and we benefited from that.
Absolutely. And Steve got a little upset when I mentioned this idea of, but to anyone listening who doesn't know what I'm talking about, Steve Spice, regular guest and contributor to the show, interjected when I said that, oh no, that's not an invitation to come on, by the way.
Well, you never know.
I do know. The foot is down. What I had said was that just because I don't like a film, and this is my point of view, that just because I don't care for a film does not mean that I don't think it's still capable of being great, to another person's point of view. The point being that my own point of view is not complete, is not all-consuming, is not everyone's point of view. Thereby, the whole point of people having other opinions than my own, and the whole point of having friends, the whole point of having perspective, is knowing that your point of view is not either correct or wrong. Now, however, there are times where one has to say this movie is bad, this movie is good, with the reasoning. And I've had, Mark, you and I have had private discussions and on-air discussions about this, about that, just that final decision, the final word, bad movie, good movie, just like dogs. Bad dog, good dog. Bad baby, good baby.
Right, and that is you laying your foot down.
And Mark, you have this. You always have that great term out that these acronyms, or these not the acronyms. I'm sorry, but
no, that's Rosemary's Baby.
You've had these great phrases that you used to be a little more ubiquitous with them years ago than you are now. But getting the job done. You used to say that to me all the time, in terms of things just having to get done, things needing to get done. You would always say,
hey, I want to say that Zav, and he's just leaving right now, has recommended what must be done in Aronofsky's Mother, which was just in the New York Times on Sunday.
Which is what I'm talking about.
Thank you, Zav.
It's the best film of the year. It is hands down the best film of the year.
You know what's the brilliant thing about this, Gabe, is just you can actually See, now, I mean, now that anyone's listening this is gonna now obviously it's gonna be weighted, but if you could determine a person's intelligence by probably their reaction to that film, and it's not the dog on anyone, but there's certain films that oh man, this person intellectually just ain't happening, because if they don't get stuff like that, you know what's what and what's not. So
Exactly.
I haven't seen the film, but I can point out a couple of films like that some people don't get, and there are these neural connections just ain't happening. It's like, oh, okay, man, I get it, man.
No, Mark, thank you so much for clarifying.
And Mother will be one of those films where you'll know who's who, man.
Yeah, we're right away. Even just, there's times where there's synergy in a movie theater where there's certain matinee showings where there's people that go to movies by themselves when the sun is shining outside, when there's like life and all this, like people going on all these, outdoor excursions, and the movie people, they don't go on opening night because, they have other things to do. But when they finally get caught, usually the most ardent fans of a filmmaker or of a certain topic, like of comic books, they don't go to films usually on opening weekend. Because they're not that consumed by the film. They're usually very aware of the film months before it comes out, before the trailers come out. They know way more about the film than the average consumer who's seen the trailer, who's actually excited for the film just on the film alone, has no concept of who the director is, the producer, any of the stars. It's just another movie to most people that go see movies on opening weekend. Now, the ardent film consumer usually goes later, second week, usually a matinee during the week on a less crowded day by themselves. And so going to movies on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday afternoon, man, you can just feel the intellectual electricity in a movie theater when there's like 5 people throughout the theater and they're scattered in these different corners of the theater. They're not there to spend time with anyone else. They want to watch a film studiously, and they're there to really absorb this film. And they have this sort of pensive mixture of tension, anxiety, sort of curiosity, and they're wondering whether this film is going to fall on which side of the pendulum, because a film, especially a really controversial work of art, comes out and has this sort of ability to swing viewers, to swing critics, and to really divide. So even a movie like Mother, that is undeniably a work of art, at the very least, even if you despise it or if you hate it, if you think all of its intellectual predispositions are annoying, too overly obvious, cutesy, pretentious, one-dimensional, the film itself still cannot be denied the fact that you have allegories that are within the allegories, which are forms of metaphors themselves. You have metaphors within an allegory. And you have other observations about the human race, the human condition, within certain aspects of metaphors within metaphors. But the thing is that all of these metaphors are delivered straight. They're not wound around layers and layers of obtuse confusion or challenge, like so many French films, or like so many European films, or films that are so ardently art films. The thing about the film Mother, which is, and for anyone listening who doesn't know the film I'm discussing right now, that Mark and I are discussing, is Darren Aronofsky's new film Mother, which is a sort of horror film. It's being advertised as a horror film, but that is definitely the wrong label to put on it. It's definitely first and foremost a Darren Aronofsky film, who is the director of Pi from 1998, Requiem for a Dream, Black Swan, The Wrestler, The Fountain, which is probably my other favorite film of his. And he's really well known for being a visual stylist, for being really loudly philosophical and very loudly allegorical. And he makes really intellectual, arty films, usually somewhat feminist in nature, with loud, very, very brooding philosophical themes, very dark toned, really ominous films, really, really, really intense, powerful, and really haunting movies about the human condition. He went to Harvard. He studied film there, and he's really the only film scholar of note to come out of Harvard who's directed films that where he's a named director, which is really odd. You'd think that Harvard, for having such a pedigree, would, if they have a film school, which they do have, they have a film program, would be producing more pronounced film scholars and filmmakers. And Aronofsky is really the only one of any real standing, of any loud acclaim to come out of it. And right from the beginning, Pi, which was his basically an extension of his student film, his graduate student film, announces himself as a definite film presence to be watched, to be noticed, to be watched out for. That he's clearly a genius, whether it's just visual or whether it's some sort of conceptual filmmaking. That there's something so pronounced and so unmistakable there that even if you don't care for his work, he's undeniable. He's not going away. You're going to be hearing more from this guy. Other filmmakers that fall into that category are Wes Anderson. He's not going away. Whether you like his work or not, he is here to stay. Pronounced visual stylist. Stanley Kubrick definitely falls into that category. P.T. Anderson falls into that category too. But Darren Aronofsky has made these very controversial, very disturbing films, and very Byzantine, very bizarre, and surreal, which is the key word. Very, very, very bizarre, just strange and sort of venereal in their sensibilities. There's lots of very Cronenbergian use of horror elements. When I say Cronenbergian, I mean bodily functions in some sort of way, sort of abnormal hallucinations that may be bloodied or might have some sort of contusion, or cuts on the body, some sort of abnormality that may or may not be real, that's some sort of metaphor for infection or disease or violence or emotional instability. Anyone who hasn't seen Black Swan, it's probably his most pronounced and most disturbing film in terms of visual style and in terms of intellectual stamina.
Yeah, that's my favorite
Swan.
Aronofsky film. I dig that one a lot. I love ballet, and so I totally dig that film.
Absolutely. So Mother, without going too much into it, it's very intense. It's wildly surreal. Like I said, it's an allegory, but it's also a straightforward film that plays on multiple levels at the same time. It's very entertaining, but it's also very disturbing in the fact that it makes very powerful claims about who we are as a species and who we are as human beings, who we are as artistic beings, who we are as spiritual beings, who we are as individuals, who we are as artists, who we are collectively, who we are individually, who we are as a sex, who we are as a race, who we are as a people, who we are as a species. Aronofsky is a very tortured and very pronounced filmmaker and thinker and artist, but I don't always care for his work, even when there's so much to admire, whether it's form, style, and the philosophical content. Sometimes I always feel like there's, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that. I don't always feel, but at times I feel like there is a certain element of romance, of charm, of sort of the fabric of film missing from his work. It's almost it's almost too clinical. It's so immaculately put together that it almost lacks unpredictability, or it lacks randomness. It lacks chance. It lacks mistake. Mark, you were just talking about the randomness of mistakes, of the randomness of takes, of an actor tripping over something naturally and keeping it in the film for the sake of realism on the Hollywood set.
Yeah.
There's a beauty to that, and in fact, there's a lot of scholars that have pointed out that there's a certain naturalism about certain films that were made by Warner Brothers during the studio era of the 1940s that have a sort of naturalism, but also an extremely contrived quality to them, where there's that line between extremely naturalistic art an extreme studio soundstage controlled contrivance. Where when you can find that line, like Nicholas Ray is a filmmaker that definitely knows how to blur that line.
And I want to point out, Gabe, Nicholas Ray's from La Crosse, Wisconsin, as is Joseph Lucy, another director, and our man here in Milwaukee, Patrick McGilligan. He did a outstanding biography on Nicholas Ray, which I'm actually reading right now, and also have his Hitchcock biography as well. Patrick McGilligan, outstanding author on film studies, and so he's here in town. Good stuff, Nicholas Ray.
Yeah, that Nicholas Ray book is you've been talking about that for a few years, and I know it's a dense book. So it's a good work on still hammering away and not giving up on that. That Hitchcock book is the definitive, even though it's not like a traditional biography in the sense of like traditional biography, born here, well, died here. What do his films mean? What kind of a person was he? That's the definitive Hitchcock book. None of the rest of them really come even close to meaning as much, mattering as much, or having as much worth as a book to read in terms of entertainment value.
Well, Donald Spato's Dark Side of Genius, you have to throw that in there as well, my man.
Yeah, I still have yet to read that. That's another one that I shouldn't compare the two because I haven't read that yet. But that studio-controlled naturalism, that line between the two, Lolita has definite moments where there's like this like phoniness or this staginess, but there's also this sort of naturalism. To Have and Have Not from 1944 definitely has this naturalism, studio-controlled naturalism. The Big Sleep from 46. So, contrivance is just a matter of taste, or it's a matter of discernment of whether that bothers you or not. Because I think that once you go into movie land, if you're watching a film, and it just depends on your taste and your preferences. Because some people can watch, like you said, Mark, like this movie It. The thing that I admired most about it was that it held together. It had a sort of stagey realism.
You never fell out of the film. I'll give it's a very well done film, and you never fall out of it. You're always with it. There's nothing that does take you out of its level of believability.
Yep. So Mark and I are now switched over to discussing 2017's It remake, which is based on Stephen King's classic novel, probably the definitive Stephen King book. Which was also, as most people probably, and anyone listening to the show most likely knows about the It miniseries that aired in 1990, which was probably one of the definitive miniseries of television in the 1990s. In some ways, the miniseries, because of the effect that it had on children of my generation, of maybe a generation younger, and of adults that saw the film, but especially children. And the way it continues to have an effect on children, but up until I'd say about 10 years ago, because I'd heard about the film and I never saw it until I was about 16 or 17, like 15, 16 or 17, and 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds when I was growing up had all seen it or had, had seen it on VHS or, had a taped copy of it. So when I saw it as a slightly older teenager, I was a little disappointed by the fact that it had none of the terrifying components that I had sort of been expecting, or none of the fear factor, because a lot of it's toned down for television, and Tim Curry is not particularly that menacing as I had been hoping, but it still has a certain factor that can't be denied. But a lot of it is unfortunately very hokey, and it's very extremely made for television, and a lot of the acting is just not particularly that good, and the budget constraints hold the film back from being great. But for a nostalgic factor, which is a huge factor in horror film adoration, is this: a lot of people that love horror films and that love films from a certain era are just in love with their childhood, because there's a romance with a bygone era that doesn't exist today. There's a calmness, there's a carefreeness, there's this sense of like romance about this time when they had less to worry about, and they had less terror in their life, or they had less pain, or they had less of the arduousness, the weight of life, the weight of the monotony of the day-to-day expanse of life. And a lot of that's all just made up. The monotony of life is made up. It's not, nothing about life has to be monotonous. Nothing about life really has to be terrifying. It just sometimes is. Nothing you can do about it. Sometimes it just goes that way.
Yeah,
Do your best.
Yeah, you're right. And what's amazing is you're talking about the nostalgia of your formative years, and you assign those feelings to these films. And, obviously it's autumn. We're talking about horror films in particular. And, childhood does have that kind of serious nature of innocence, in a sense of purity. That means you haven't been tainted by the electric company yet. And... everything else such as that. Even though I think paying bills is great, I've always had a good relationship with the IRS. I've talked to those boys throughout the year, and it's fun to pay. It's fun to get refunds. It's fun to be in the game. But none of that, of course, occurs in childhood. But I think there are obviously there's people that have a serious routine, and that I can't. I've known what that's like. I can't imagine doing that for half a century, and I tell you, some people have lives that are just off the hook. They're encountering all of these people and circumstances every day. So, I think, though, I have as much nostalgia for childhood as I do for last year. It's so continually off the wall. So I just wanted to add that as how we look back at things, that some of these very nostalgic times, they can even be last week, man, or like 3 weeks ago, or whenever that all those things occur. But yeah, heck yeah, my man. Just threw that in there, Gabe. That's all.
No, that's a really good observation, Mark, because, I do have a lot of nostalgia for things that happened during my adult life that I think I would equate more for my nostalgia than per se like the nostalgia that a lot of people have for their childhood. Because a lot of people don't have great childhoods, and they don't have that, like, perfect time of place of that sense of awe and like that Spielbergian sense of awe and wonder and discovery and sort of that wide expanse of the unknown, of the unbelievable, of the beautiful, of the newly discovered. So childhood and horror films kind of go hand in hand for a lot of people, or fantasy, or certain like movies like Labyrinth or The Last Unicorn, and just like slightly more well-made or interesting works of art that fall into that line between really, really good kids films and family films. So a lot of people hold on to that stuff because it has like a special meaning. But in terms of the actual film or the filmmaking, it's like, well, like, like it's not. People are usually not watching stuff that they loved from their childhood because they're so immersed with what a well-made technical achievement it is, or what a powerful, potent work of art it is. But there's something to be said about, if it touched you as a child, that's truly, that's just as successful a work of art as something touching you as an adult. But a film like Mother, back to Darren Aronofsky's contemporary release, Mark, when you're discussing the meter, like it's almost like a radiation meter. Like, you're discussing certain films, and you see certain films, and whether you like it or not, does this film register on just the base level of what are the metaphorical, what's the allegory pointing at here, and what is this film interpreting? Okay, base one. Base two, do any of those metaphors and allegories line up? Do they mean anything? Base two. Base three, what are the other things that he may or may not be saying about the human condition? And then, instead of hitting a home run, there's just more bases, I guess, if we're like playing cricket. Like there's a film like Mother doesn't go in a straight line from point A to point B with like cantankerous exposition, cantankerous plotting and planning and just execution of one-dimensional characters doing one-dimensional things for one-dimensional reasons that get to one-dimensional points in the plot, with one-dimensional arcs, to one-dimensional resolutions for one-dimensional reasons that just sort of end in this sort of obviously contrived one-dimensional way. Mark, you've talked on the show for many years and in private to me about, just conventional films that go in these conventional ways. Just you can only stomach a few of,
Right.
so many of them a year. And I really appreciate you saying that, because the more that the older I get, the more I agree with your sensibilities. That it's like watching these films. It's very pleasurable in a certain sense, but even more than your sort of generous affability towards them of like, man, I like seeing this Hollywood product because it exists and it's nice to see, and it's sort of like taking drugs or something. It's like, oh man, that's real nice, but man, if you take drugs every day, man, you're gonna become an addict and you're not gonna do anything with your life. I just am starting to really, really agree with that sensibility more and more, that I don't want to be informed about everything. There's a lot of movies that 3 years ago I would have watched, even though I knew that they were average or bad, or like I just want to watch something entertaining that has certain good qualities. If it's not if it's not mostly likely to be a really good film, I just don't want to watch it, because time is precious and your life is precious, and what you choose to do, even for your entertainment, is really precious. And if you care about the movies you watch, you care about the reasons you watch these movies, you care about the thoughts that go through your head and the feelings that you have, putting junk into your mind is going to make your mind junky.
I told you so.
It's just so true. And watching a movie like Mother, where the entertainment factor is even feeding your soul, where it's like watching a film that is giving you something, taking you somewhere, offering you something for your sensibilities, making your $10.25 mean something. Even if you don't like it, even if you don't want it, taking you somewhere that is worth remembering, worth thinking about, worth feeling, worth discussing. Something that has something visually grand, something visually interesting, where there's a design and a potency, and it's not just some studio-made contrivance where things happen for a basic reasoning, that the characters were mapped out by a bunch of studio heads to make money in a franchise, for more franchises to come out. Now, not to say that some of these franchises are not very good movies, because these studio heads, after they come up with their plan, they put people in charge of certain films that actually know how to make an artistic film in an artistic way. That they hire screenwriters that care about these stories, that care about these characters, that care about these films, because they know that actually they're more likely to make more money if they put passionate, actually creative people in charge of making films. Because for the most of the history of Hollywood, after the golden age of Hollywood, most people that were in charge of studios, on again, off again, are people that don't understand movies, don't care about movies, and don't love movies. And on again, off again, those people will think that they're extremely creative because they have business degrees, or because they want to be creative and they have the big idea and they understand the formula, or they understand that they came up with these movies and they made money, so therefore they must be good at making movies. What the formula has come down to recently, thank God, and it's ultimately going to be its destruction towards the smaller, mid-budgeted film, is the fact that a lot of these studio heads that have made a ton of money through franchises have realized that putting people that are actually passionate and knowledgeable and want to put care and effort and love into movies that they care about, in charge of a few films that'll make a ton of money, rather than hiring a bunch of mid-level to low-level art house filmmakers and avant-garde provocateurs to make a bunch of random films, is more likely to generate a ton of revenue. So what that's done is that's splintered the filmmaking world into two categories. you've got big budget, extreme Hollywood, cape waving in the wind movies that are being made by all the studios in different forms or different variants to create sequels, spin-offs, and remakes, and that's about it. And even if a film doesn't fall into that category, it has to be something that's easily and heavily advertisable, that's pretty much guaranteed to pull in a good, solid worldwide profit that comes from a guaranteed formula of some sort. Anything that doesn't fall into that category goes to Netflix or goes to Amazon Prime without fail. Anything that doesn't fall into the guaranteed extreme multi-millions of dollars only has a life or a future or a possibility of surviving. Anything in the independent film world that isn't marketable is only given life on a streaming service. That's the only place that independent cinema really has any chance anymore. They get limited releases. Some people still go see these movies in the theater in like landmark theater chains, but increasingly, production companies like A24 and Annapurna Films, which Annapurna put out Detroit, A24 put out The End of the Tour, Good Time, stuff like that. Smaller, thought-provoking, independent films, American and from abroad. But increasingly, those films are rarer and rarer and more rare. So there are these occasions where a big budget, big spectacle thing with tons of money behind it also has all the innovation and the artistry and the potency and the love and the care and the, let's say it, Mark, the flaws.
There you go.
The flaws of film made by an artist. And Mother is one of those rare films that has a ton of money behind it, but also has the ingenuity of an artist. And the fact that this film bombed at the box office, which Darren Aronofsky said it was going to, he publicly stated that this film is not going to make any money. He was really angry at the way that Paramount advertised the film, because they advertised it both shrugging off his artistic ambitions of what the film is actually about, and they kind of contrived it to look like a bad horror film. They made it look like a muddled horror film that didn't know what it was. Like, it didn't really give any payoff. So there was no reason for people that like bad horror films or that have no taste to come see the film. And there was no reason for people that are ardent Aronofsky fans who maybe don't know Aronofsky by name to come see this art house film as well. So therefore, you have a film that completely tanked at the box office both weekends that it was out, but should actually be seen.
Oh my gosh. Is it still out? I don't want to miss it.
No, Mark, you please go see it.
No, is it still, my man, is it still out is what I'm asking?
Yeah. I mean, in most theaters, it came out, it just finished its second weekend.
Okay.
So right now, it's heading toward, it'll probably be gone after this week, though, because it's absolutely losing all its money.
Yeah, because the way you're describing the whole scenario, it's like, my word, man, has it left already? And you're telling us that it hasn't, and we still have that opportunity to see it and plan to see it. Is that correct, my man?
I would say check your listings, Mark, and try to see it if you can.
Well, I should say so before getting in that car.
But I'd say check your listings and see if you can't get to the Oriental, if they're showing it, the Oriental or the Downer. Otherwise, see if you're actually more likely to see it at AMC Mayfair, where they do give a slightly longer life to movies, even if they aren't pulling in a ton of money. They usually keep films there, even if most theaters or smaller theaters like Marcus theaters will get rid of a film if it's not pulling in money, usually after 2 weeks, 3 weeks at the max. AMC will still keep a low-performing film on like 1 or 2 screenings especially if it's made by an auteur or a filmmaker of some note, or if it has like a smaller audience that still is going to show up because of the fact that it has a niche audience. It has a certain appeal to it. It's not just a bad film that just died. So please. I didn't have high hopes for it because I'm not always a big Aronofsky fan, but man, very, very good stuff. Very excited, Mark. I really hope you get to see it. It's
believe you me, I will be on a mission to do that, because once I focus in on something, it usually gets accomplished. So
Good. Yeah, it's interesting to see two horror films that were actually really good within less than a 24-hour period. Because normally horror films, I just avoid them unless they get really good reviews. I just don't see contemporary horror films unless they get widespread critical acclaim. So it was cool to see two films that have gotten widespread critical acclaim before Halloween. That both are admirable, interesting works of art.
yeah, and I want to say. And I want to say, too, The Color from Outer Space, I started reading H.P. Lovecraft because of Halloween. I'll kick in with Edgar Allan Poe. And as a populist nod, I have begun a Stephen King story in The Bazaar of Bad Dreams. So all of that horror literature, too. And also Stephen King's Danse Macabre, which is a survey of horror in film and literature. So all of the haunting season is being heavily honored as we speak.
Mark, could you elaborate some more on Green Inferno?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm not going to give it away, but as to what it is, but it's great. Takes some great political jabs, which I certainly appreciate, and also it. What's amazing about it, again, like I say, it's the kind of like the confluence of worthy craftsmanship and relevant subtext, and it's camp. It's kind of like the touches upon the fervor of the young socio-political angst, and how it's they get kind of like hot coffee in their face, and it's fascinating on many levels, because after this extraordinarily horrifying ordeal, which is certainly an understatement, they still revert to. Well, again, like I can't give it away. So anyway, it sets up, again, like in that great Hollywood paradigm, if someone has a particular habit, then that will pay off narratively, and it'll come back and so forth. And also, it's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of like hard to, it deals with, it deals with going into the dense Peruvian jungles to idealistically stop the encroachment of development, and the very people that they are defending, they become victims of. So again, it's highly analogous in subtextual in contemporary socio-political thought. It's very well crafted in the sense that everything is a setup that leads to a payoff. And if you're into tight Hollywood screenwriting, this film and films like that are the ones to study. So definitely a thumbs up in that arena. And again, like I say, I got to be kind of cautious. I mean, I did just kind of give it away in a sense, and someone had compared it to Cannibal Holocaust, and it's very brutal in that sense. And I just it's well worth seeing once as a work of craftsmanship and as a work of horror craftsmanship.
Well, that's awesome. I'm really glad you've elaborated on that, because I've been meaning to see both of Eli Roth's 2015. It was either like 13, 14, or 15. He had two films that came out like back to back: Knock Knock and The Green Inferno.
Have you seen Knock Knock? Is that a horror film? I have no clue.
Knock Knock. Yeah, Knock Knock. I honestly was watching on a streaming service and then never finished it, and it got taken off of it.
I beg of you, Gabe. I beg of you not to give it away.
Okay.
Because I've got to see it then. And
Knock Knock and The Green Inferno were of the two. I mean, Eli Roth makes really extremely, they fall into the technical category of exploitation, but they're really not exploitive films at all, because he's really a man full of ideas, and full of political ideas, full of sociological ideas, like you stated, where his films have as much nuance and relativism as they do brutality and sort of like stupidity, like this base horror. Like, give me the goods, give me the violence, give me the gore, give me the sex, give me all the dumb crap that I want. So
Well, you know what he is? He's the master of the foreshadowing and he's the master
Yeah.
of first act foreshadowing. You can really feel the density of that something very ominous is coming up on the horizon. So no matter how long it takes to get there, it doesn't matter because you are really beginning to feel the compression of this ominous cloud that is getting darker and heavier and lower.
yeah, what I really like about Hostel,
There you go, the prime example.
From 2005, Eli Roth made a film called Hostel that was extremely controversial, and it was widely discussed and
Yes.
widely viewed. It was seen by a lot of people mainly as being this exploitive. People went to see it because of the fact that it was this work of exploitation, and it paid off. In fact, it's one of the few horror films
Yes.
that I've been anticipating for the very reason that it became controversial.
Yes.
And
you know what, Gabe? Yeah.
And it works on the level
Yes.
that it's supposed to, which I remember seeing in the theater and being not only entertained to the level that I was hoping for, which usually, especially with like horror films
Yes.
or B films.
And many of us seen a Hostel and completely agree what you're saying. And Gabe, in keeping with the Halloween spirit, in keeping with the haunting nature of these forthcoming shows, we have a special segment. It's called 2 Minutes Till Midnight.
The mother. The consequence of the silence. The mother. The inductions of the remembers. The history. The family. The father is the mother.
And I think that was significant, profound in its own way. And, sir, at our special 2 Minutes to Midnight segment, you have something to add, I believe.
No, I just wondered what movie you were referring to.
Are you for real?
Well, I just got on the show, so I don't know.
Well, welcome aboard.
Oh, Mark, what are you doing?
And what we're doing, Gabe, this is a special segment at the tail end of the show called 2 Minutes to Midnight, where we respect the Halloween season, the autumnal hauntings of the airwaves. Guys, you have literally 1 minute to go for it. This is your time in the sun, in the autumnal sun. This is not the time to search for words, to pan the void of your creeks, of your mental creeks.
I have nothing to add. I have anything to add.
The life.
Okay, I have given these men airtime. I have one man who in scorn has hung up. And you guys who have stormed the stage are now blank in verse.
The consequence of the induction.
Yes, that was the consequence of this act that I provided. But I think we can still make the best of it as I watch the clock. And I'm going to have to start shutting systems down. Thank you, listeners. Well, we gave Victor and Steve the stage, and they didn't know what to do with it, but we love them nonetheless. We will be on at the same time next week on WXR WLP 104.1 FM Milwaukee. To hear past episodes, visit riverwestradio.com/shows and click Cinema Fireside.